Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, this week Immaru made it clear that he didn't exactly like our prospects and was planning on cutting and running before Xivu Arath claimed victory. He even entertained the idea of going freelance like Finch, as he put it, implying that he's happy to work alongside others without the intent of being loyal to Savathûn. However, the Witch Queen had contingencies of her own. In the space of a single lore tab, we've seen Savathûn and Immaru's story this season get expanded, and a new mystery with some terrifying possibilities that the Witch Queen herself predicted. Immaru has stated that he believes Eris doesn't have what it takes. Savathûn is not so pessimistic, but she believes that the cost of our victory in that case will be so great that we'll never be able to recover. And then there's these whispers of a mysterious thing called an heirloom. We'll cover all of that today. So the lore book that's brought us all these developments is the Rites of Passage lore book. I've spoken about this one not so much this season, but the contents of it this week are particularly serious and worth diving into. I'll not beat around the bush, I'll get to reading the contingency plan's lore entry right now. In the end, they'll accept your offer. The witness won't leave them any choice. Savathûn's voice echoed throughout the empty ritual chamber. Immaru floated in the middle of the vast space, listening intently to his boss's pre-recorded instructions. With the Warmind gone and the Traveler incapacitated, they'll only have one option left. Savathûn's recorded voice cooed. They'll have to do things our way, and you'll be there to make sure they do. Immaru grumbled. The boss was betting a lot on the Vanguard, more than she bet on her own brood. Pride stung at the edges of the first ghost's ego. He'd been an exemplary leader in Savathûn's absence. If anything, he should be the one overseeing the war effort against Xivu Arath. Then again, he placated himself. Maybe it wasn't a matter of competency. Maybe the Witch Queen just saw the Vanguard as more expendable than her own brood. Hell, he chuckled to himself, maybe this was all just a long con to lead the Vanguard into Xivu's waiting jaws. Only the boss knew for sure. Immaru initiated playback on another recording, preparing to enact whichever of the hundreds of Savathûn's contingencies came to pass. If Ikora is the one to accept my bargain, your job will be much easier, the recording began. That one has a deep well of bloodthirst. She ruled the Crucible for many years, as you recall. Her eagerness to be reacquainted with death will lead her back to her convoluted ideas on Thanatonautics. If anything, she'll get too powerful too quickly, the absent-minded Savathûn mused. If that happens, just arrange for her to accidentally kill one of her own. Glint, perhaps. That should slow her down for a while. Don't worry about putting her off for good, though. Once she feels the power of the sword, she'll never stop. Immaru was filled with admiration and suspicion. He wondered if there was a trove of Savathûn's contingencies somewhere that involved his sacrifice. Surely not. He was too important for that. He initiated playback on another recording. If the Awoken Queen somehow discovered the pattern before I'm resurrected, the Witch Queen began, the Guardians may attempt to take the heirloom by force. It won't be Mara's idea, of course, but my dear Osiris, in his cleverness, might talk them into a poor decision. In that case, it won't be worth fighting them off. That would only play to Xivu's advantage. Instead, deliver the heirloom to the Cabal Empress, Savathûn continued. She has more reason than any to use it against my sister, and a protracted war of attrition will be inevitable. While those two rip each other apart, you can approach the Vanguard with a slightly modified deal. Immaru cut off the recording. He hoped it wouldn't come to that. The Vanguard had already guaranteed his safety, but the Cabal made no such assurances. Showing up on their doorstep with the heirloom was the last thing he wanted. He initiated another recording. If all goes to my original plan, Eris will reach a crossroads. A hint of concern snuck into Savathûn's voice. At some point, she'll glimpse a path to overcome my sister without resurrecting me at all. She would have to put the Vanguard to the sword, followed swiftly by the Eliksni and Cabal. The Hive she would spare, I think, for her convenience. If that happens, Savathun concluded, there are no more contingencies, no more fallbacks. The Hive would have a new queen, and you, a new leader. Wouldn't that be interesting? So, where do we even start to unpack all of this? Well, I think we can begin, at very least, with the note that Savathun has had some terrifying predictions about how this might have gone from the very beginning. Immaru in this lore tab seems to imply that Savathun has hundreds of contingency plans contained within these hundreds of recordings. I think it's fair to say that she mapped out almost every possible outcome for the upcoming conflict and the plan for her resurrection. Knowing that the Witch Queen had successfully engineered in the past the downfall of other Ascendant Hives such as Crota, and knowing that she even deftly manipulated us during the Witch Queen campaign, allowing us to feed her own plan back to her, I think we need to take these predictions here and treat them with quite a bit of reverence. Whilst Immaru has played back these recordings, they were meant for him, and him alone. That implies that we weren't necessarily meant to hear all this. Unless it forces Immaru to act in a certain way, I don't believe that Savathun has a reason to lie to him in these recordings. So, if we're taking these predictions seriously, let's address that last set of paragraphs that Savathun has some pause over. The idea that Eris can find a way to win without resurrecting Savathun, but that she would need to take over the Hive, destroy the whole of the Eliksni, Cabal, and Vanguard, and would become the new queen, rising from the ashes of circumstance. Essentially, this is the terrifying endgame scenario that might happen. Savathun has predicted that it's possible. In fact, Savathun implies that this moment absolutely will happen if everything continues to go to plan. She just doesn't know if Eris is going to accept that power. I would hope, much like the rest of us, that she won't, because that's very much not in her nature, and I don't believe it's what her character would do. But with all of that being said, it's still terrifying that Savathun is even taking that gamble, because as best we know from her predictions, they've all been able to account for the variety of circumstances that have arisen. Also, this implies that Eris knows Savathun has to be resurrected in other instances if she's not going to sit there and consume the power of the Vanguard, the Cabal, and the Eliksni to defeat Xivu. So, either she must resurrect Savathun to fight off her sister, or alternatively, she consumes everything and becomes the new sovereign god of the Hive. One of those possibilities is going to happen. That implies Savathun has already kind of drawn the winning hand, and it kind of tells us what might happen next week, although the exact mechanics of it aren't so clear. Essentially, unless Savathun is deliberately misrepresenting information or has overlooked something critical that works in Eris's advantage specifically, she's already calculated our fate and the outcome of this entire battle, and unless that one possibility of Eris completely taking over occurs, we lose. In fact, even if Eris does completely take over, we lose. So, yeah, there's no decent chance of us getting through this without either losing everything or watching the Witch Queen return. Eris Morn either needs to damn herself and Asa into becoming the newest parts of the Hive Pantheon, or she needs to resurrect Savathun in the process of this. At least that's what this seems to imply. Failure to do either of these means that she'll be overcome by the Hive God of War and will be left for dead as we go on to face the oncoming tide of darkness. That in itself is bad enough, and it's a kind of scary thing that Savathun has planned for all of this. Everything thus far appears to have been going according to plan too, and even her wildest deviations of the plan, such as Ikora accepting the bargain, aren't in the picture, meaning that this is indeed something that Savathun is prepared for. It was Eris that accepted this bargain, and that is exactly what the Witch Queen anticipated at the heart of all of it. Whatever plan the Witch Queen has laid out is going ahead without a hitch, and that should worry us all. But with all of that said, there is something else behind the scenes that is going on here, and it's at this moment that I want to get into the real meat of this video, with some peculiar notes within the passage that seem to refer to something called the heirloom. The lines of particular importance pertaining to the heirloom are as follows. If the Awoken Queen somehow discovered the pattern before I'm resurrected, the Witch Queen began, the Guardians may attempt to take the heirloom by force. It won't be Mara's idea, of course, but my dear Osiris, in his cleverness, might talk them into a poor decision. In that case, it won't be worth fighting them off. That would only play to Xivu's advantage. Instead, deliver the heirloom to the Cabal Empress, Savathun continued. She has more reason than any to use it against my sister, and a protracted war of attrition will be inevitable. While those two rip each other apart, you can approach the Vanguard with a slightly modified deal. Immaru cut off the recording. He hoped it wouldn't come to that. The Vanguard had already guaranteed his safety, but the Cabal made no such assurances. Showing up on their doorstep with the heirloom was the last thing he wanted. He initiated another recording. So here's the thing. Nobody has a clue what this heirloom is. Even if you make key searches for the term heirloom or similar terms such as inheritance, inherit, or inheritor on Ishtar, you'll come up pretty short, unless you're looking for Eva's holiday oven, which I don't believe we are. It's almost as if the word has been strategically shied away from in any context that might link it to the current narrative, but I think that's just my perspective as someone who's looking for answers. What can we actually tell about what this heirloom is, though? Well, if we're going to do this, let's get out the conspiracy board again. Martin, deploy the board! Okay, so first we should actually acknowledge what the function of the heirloom seems to be, if it has one. Whatever it is, it's capable of holding some kind of immense power. It's easily enough to confront Xivu Arath, given that it would be used by Keitel and her Cabal to bring their war with Xivu Arath to a state of grinding attrition. One presumes that the power required to challenge the Hive God of War must be paracausal, or at least must be capable of influencing a paracausal being. In my mind, that means it might be information, but also it might just be something that has paracausal power. That's a big assumption, but it is one that I'm going to make. Not to mention, the Cabal had no hope of facing off against Xivu given their current standing because they have no paracausal forces of their own, and the Hive God's power is beyond that of any mortal being. Even a potent combatant such as the Empress herself cannot face against an Ascendant Hive and hope to win. So this is going to be our first assumption. This must be some kind of thing that provides paracausal power. Secondly, we know that the Guardians would fight the Lucent Hive for it, and that it's something that Immaru could deliver personally to the Empress of the Cabal. This narrows it down somewhat, as it could be a physical item, a piece of information, or perhaps a larger functioning object that needs its location revealed. Whatever it is, Immaru would be able to deliver it somehow, and it implies that it's either in his possession or that only he knows its location, or perhaps that the pattern to discovering it could be found later on, and that the Guardians would need to fight through the Lucent Hive to get it, thus implying that regardless of what happens, there are Lucent Hive wherever this thing is. So yeah, we're going to throw Immaru here on the board too, because Immaru knows what it is, knows where it is, and knows that they could deliver it. Thirdly, and perhaps most complexly, the name heirloom itself implies something. Heirlooms are, of course, items of significance that are passed down generations of a family. In this instance, an heirloom might be something that we can expand out further past the strict family definition, and might instead be something that's just been passed down to a variety of notable people one by one. Unfortunately, this helps to clarify what the heirloom might be, but also dramatically widens the scope of that search as well. For context, there must be easily a dozen different artifacts that can fit the description of something that has been passed from person to person here. This could be anything from the Oxa machine to an Ahamkara egg for all I know, but here are a few examples that myself and others throughout the community thought of, and a few things that might qualify as an heirloom. Firstly, the Crown of Sorrow has been passed from Savathun to Calus to Galran, back to Calus, back to Savathun, and then to Eris by the time of the Season of the Haunted. It is also paracausal, so maybe it counts. It is, however, not in Immaru's possession. The Worm familiar from the Osmium dynasty was passed from the old Osmium king to Savathun in the form of Siphona, where it was preserved and then was taken by us in the Witch Queen campaign and then used by Ikora. It is also paracausal, but Savathun didn't know about the secrets it held regarding the witness's deception, so perhaps it's unlikely that she would have known that it was some key to something greater. she seems to have left it and forgotten or abandoned it. Also again, we're in possession of this hive artifact, so it's not in Imaru's possession, meaning it's probably not the heirloom. Savathun's own worm was originally Savathun's, of course, and then it was taken by Mara Sov. It was momentarily going to be implanted into her, and then was passed on to us so that we could use it in the Parasite exotic weapon frame. It's also likely that the worm itself is paracausal, just like the worm familiar that was originally Sathona's. However, again, we're in possession of it, not Imaru, so it's probably not the heirloom. Also, the worm is pretty, it doesn't like working with us. It's not a great, I hope you don't get him as a partner in labs. He's kind of a jerk. The Tablets of Ruin were originally made by Oryx, and at least one of them made its way into Savathun's throne world, where it was guarded by Alak Hul until we took it. The power they contain led Alrix to become Oryx the Taken King, allowing him to commune with the deep, implying that the Tablets of Ruin either hold paracausal power or lead people to paracausal power contained within the deep, aka the darkness, aka the witness. It might also not be the only one that's out there, so perhaps we're just looking for a different Tablet of Ruin, which Imaru might hold. So, possibly? Next up, I'm thinking about Crota's sword, the Darkest Edge, which is significant in the sense of it is literally an heirloom because it was passed from Oryx to his son at his son's birth. That being said, I don't really think this qualifies as an heirloom in the real sense that we're looking for, because whilst it definitely holds paracausal power, it's not really that important in the grand scheme of things. It's probably the only example of something being passed from one literal family member to another, but I don't see why one particular Ascendant Hive sword is any different from another. Also, as best I know, we just left that thing behind, so no one knows where it is anymore. Probably not in Imaru's possession. Quaria was a Vex Mind known as the Blade Transform that was taken by Oryx and then was gifted to his sister Savathun. It being taken is capable of significant paracausal power. However, it's also dead. Probably. Unless that has some deception behind it, but I'm going to presume that it is indeed dead because we killed it in the Season of the Splicer, so probably not the heirloom. Moving over to the Awoken side of things, we could look at a suggestion that was made by my fellow lore creator Yvaze, who has a video on this topic on their channel as well. Yvaze spoke about the potential for Argus Scepter and Riga's Crown as being things that could be inherited. The Awoken and their powerful artifacts are also definitely paracausal, so that's something worth considering, but they're not something that's in Imaru's immediate possession, and I don't think he would be capable of passing them onto the Cabal, because Mara is kind of attached to all of those, and we still hold Argus Scepter, so it's probably not any of these either. Then there's the Taken Ahamkara egg that was found during the Season of the Lost that can be seen in the background of one of Mara's chambers within the area that was sectioned off for her in the helm. We needed to go through a portal to the Dreaming City to reach it, but it's there. The problem, of course, with this is that, well, it's definitely paracausal, but also it's not in Imaru's possession. It is tantalizing though, because this might have been one of Riven's eggs, and if so, it was inherited by Mara, and might directly be something that Riven would have given her, because it might have been something that helped fulfill Mara's wish for unique asymmetric power. This is the reason why the Great Hunt was initiated, and why Riven is the only Ahamkara in the system at the time when we find her. So yeah, very interesting possibility, but again, as best we know, not in Imaru's possession. All of these things technically fit part of the definition of what the heirloom might be, but their relation to the Hive and whether they're what Savathun is talking about is unclear. Lots of them would be really hard for Imaru to get his hands on, and honestly, there is no specific artifact that we know of, as best I can tell, that is still in the possession of Savathun specifically. The last thing to note is this. If the Cabal are able to take possession of it, and Imaru is still able to make the deal with us after the fact, only slightly altered, it implies that what is given as the heirloom is not truly required to open the way to the witness in the Pale Heart of the Traveller. Savathun states that the deal would need to be slightly altered, which again implies that something else could be substituted. Savathun also states that understanding the power the heirloom offers would require someone to decipher the pattern, and that Osiris might suggest taking the heirloom by force if he were to learn of it. Savathun also states that Mara Sov might be the one to discover the pattern first. Side note, and I don't know if this is going to be relevant, the word pattern comes up a lot when discussing the Vex. They work to achieve a final pattern. They are described as primal patterns in the Unveiling Lorebook, and they have to make everything in the universe fit their pattern, according to Praedyth in the Vault of Glass. You get the drift. Pattern comes up a lot with them, maybe they're involved. Unclear if that's the case, but I figured it was worth putting up there. Ultimately, we get a picture of what the heirloom might be, but we have no clue what it actually is. Bungie's done a great job of obfuscating what this could be. However, there is one distinct possibility that I haven't seen discussed by people yet, and I want to discuss it here. The Witness had to make contact with the Veil in order to access the Pale Heart of the Traveler. The mechanics of that interaction still aren't understood well enough for us to say exactly what it was about the Veil's contact with the Traveler that allowed the Witness to enter it. The Veil and the Traveler's link might be the reason why. So if the Veil is important, it's worth noting who had it in their possession for the longest time. It's been on Neomuna for ages, but before that it was held by Nezarec before... Oh yeah, it ended up on Neptune because Savathûn stole it from Nezarec, and she killed him. So suddenly we have an implication here. It feels as though all the relevant pieces of the puzzle are there. There's power within the Veil that Savathûn might understand that others don't. Now, of course, there are a dozen problems that this raises, not the least of which would be how is Immaru to offer the Veil to the Cabal Empress? But perhaps it's not the Veil itself that's really up on offer, perhaps it's the means by which the power of the darkness within the Veil can be truly exploited. This is information Immaru might well hold, and if the power of the Veil is indeed the power of Strand, or perhaps some manipulation of Strand that we don't yet know about, then Immaru could impart this knowledge to us, whilst also keeping his word to the Cabal and giving them significant power as well. The power of Strand is most intense around the Veil itself, but Strand is everywhere. Perhaps the right technique of blending light to dark would be what's required to access the Pale Heart. And if the Cabal were given Strand as a power, they would have the paracausal abilities required to bring their war with Xivu Arath to a stalemate. It's of course totally possible that this theory is nothing but Imbaru, and for that matter we still don't know if this pertains to the Imbaru engine in any way. But there suddenly is a new mystery within the seasonal narrative. Whatever this heirloom and the pattern it seems to be a part of are, they could define the means to our survival. Keep an eye on all this. I don't believe this one is done, and I think that there is a chance we will see what's happening in the weeks going forward. I think this will be relevant as the next weeks approach, but as Xivu Arath readies her blades, let's just keep an open mind. We still don't know what any of this means. That being said, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and of course, know that you can leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Do you have an idea of what the heirloom or perhaps the pattern might be? I'm not sure. I said something about the Oxa machine at the very beginning. That's perhaps the one thing I've not expanded on here. Maybe there's something else that I've missed. Let me know. I'm fascinated to hear what the community's suggestions are at large. That being said, if you did enjoy the video, go ahead and leave a like. And, of course, you can hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Perodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.